all to this online webinar titled Ivy League Insights, a step-by-step guide for aspiring engineers by Dr. Ramisa Fariha, organized by IEEE NSU Student Branch Women in Engineering Affinity Group in collaboration with the IEEE NSU Student Branch. IEEE, an acronym for Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, is the largest technical professional association headquartered in New York City. Its core purpose is to foster technological innovation and excellence for the benefit of humanity. IEEE NSU Student Branch is a technical sub-unit of IEEE that thrives on serving its members with knowledge and skills. IEEE NSU Student Branch Women in Engineering is an affinity group specializing in women in engineering. Currently, IEEE Women in Engineering Affinity Group is the largest international professional organization dedicated to female engineers. Our IEEE NSU Student Branch Women in Engineering Affinity Group aims to promote and foster non-technical and technical skills in an academic setting. Today's webinar is designed for students who aspire to take their academic and professional journey to the next level. Whether you dream of studying at a top-tier institution or building a strong career in STEM, this webinar will provide you with practical strategies and real-life guidance. Our webinar, Ivy League Insights, a step-by-step guide for aspiring engineers, will cover crucial aspects of Ivy League admissions, research opportunities, and profile building, all from someone who has experienced it firsthand. We are truly honored to have with us Dr. Ramisa Fariha, a distinguished postdoctoral researcher and a Ph.D. graduate from Brown University, one of the Ivy League's finest institutions. Dr. Ramisa Fariha is a biomedical engineer, mass spectrometrist, and translational researcher advancing global accessibility in clinical diagnostics and is currently a postdoctoral research associate at the Brown University RNA Center. Her work bridges engineering, diagnostics, and public health with direct implications for opioid exposure screening, reproductive health monitoring, and mental health biomarker detection. She has led over nine industry academic collaborations with PerkinElmer, Revity Incorporated, and Spectra Systems Corp., resulting in multiple RUO diagnostic kits. Dr. Fariha's research and advocacy have been featured in the Boston Globe, AAAS Eureka Alert, and STEM Her magazine. She's a 2024 STAT Wunderkind, an NPA Impact Fellow, and a recipient of the MSACL Young Investigator Award for 2 consecutive years. Her long-term vision is to democratize bioanalytical diagnostics for undeserved communities globally, starting with a single drop of blood. Dr. Fariha will be sharing her journey along with realistic steps to help students prepare academically, build impactful research experiences, and strategically plan for the Ivy League admissions process. Her insights are sure to inspire and guide everyone aspiring to join the world's leading universities. Without any further delay, we now invite Dr. Ramisa Fariha to take over the session.
Thank you so much, Tasmi. That was a wonderful introduction, and I'm glad to be a part of this. First of all, audio check. Is everything okay?
Yeah, everything's great.
Wonderful. So happy to see all of you, and thank you so much for having me for this talk. I know I shared a couple of slides with Shira, but it was more like, hey, this is how my journey started, but it has a couple of pro tips for those of you who are interested. So I typically do a bunch of talks that are for high school students, and then I also do talks that are for students like you. And I just kind of want to get a sense of what year in the programs are you? Like, is most of the audience in? First year, second year, third, fourth? Just by, you can type away in the chats, that's fine. Okay. Amazing. Great. So all of you at this point, so except for like Kazi, Tashia, Bari, all of you are younger than my existing students. Great. I love this. So I often get asked how my journey kind of started. And let me see if I can share the screen with you real quick. Okay. Lovely. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful. So, I actually was a little overwhelmed when I was invited to talk about Ivy League insights because I consider myself extremely fortunate and lucky. But then I figured I would share my story a little bit with you all. So I was born and raised in Bangladesh. I completed my O&A level in Bangladesh, and of course now I'm a Brown. And the story is not just about, hey, this is what I've done, but it's more about, I just did not give up. And so I think that is something everyone can learn a few things from. But before like delving into all of that, I just wanted to give you all a little bit of insight on my research, what I've done so far, and how just engineering in general is not a one size fits all formula, and how there's really nothing that like right off the bat. Because I actually ended up working a lot with electrical devices when I was doing my PhD. And prior to my PhD, I had never seen, like, the last time I made a circuit board was when I was a third year student in college. So basically, long story short, there are overlaps, and your biggest fueling energy is your desire to make a difference. And so for me, I started out at Penn State, did a couple of things there, but some of my most memorable things is being awarded Freshman of the Year. I was the first international to get that, being featured on the alumni magazine. But of course, I think my most coveted moment was showing my parents what I was doing for research. And of course, my dad's an attorney. He didn't know what he was looking at actually in this picture. But long story short, I proactively sought out that research opportunity. And that is something that made a difference. Now, did I always know I wanted to go to graduate school? Yes. So my understanding of this webinar, at least the audience, is you all are either interested in pursuing graduate school or academia, or you actually want to make real life translational impact. So for me, what happened was right after Penn State, I knew I wanted to go to graduate school. I just wasn't sure exactly for what. So then I went to the industry, and it was supposed to be a 6 months co-op that they extended for over a year because I worked a lot. But long story short, I was doing things that was going straight into the patients. And that taught me a lot about the sense of ethics and responsibility that I needed to learn. And that is something I try to teach to all my students to this day. And of course, I came to Brown, and how I got to Brown, I'm gonna get to that story in the Q&A. But long story short, when I joined Brown, it was in an optics lab, and I had zero experience of optics. And the whole story was my advisor wanted me not because I had any sort of experience, but because he liked what my driving force was. He actually really liked my story. So for my master's, what I did was I was making actually three-dimensional breast cancer tissues, and I was treating them with anti-cancer drugs, and I was imaging them in real time using optical coherence tomography, and then collecting terabytes of data that I would then reconstruct, and then do like an endpoint assay to figure out how the drug was effective. And of course, I graduated in the middle of the pandemic, which was a drama of its own. But this was when students were getting sent back home, things were rough. Um, and for me, what happened was I had a reputation of just never saying no and working a lot. And that's how my doctoral advisor found me. And while the whole world was shut down during the pandemic, I was working full time because we had received a COVID research grant. And one of the first things I told my doctoral advisor was, I don't understand microfluidics. I don't know what it is. I have never done any of the diagnostic work, and you're going to have to start teaching me from scratch. And it was just a plain, honest confession. And he's a hands-off advisor who's never in the lab. He's never going to teach you anything. It's a big journey of self-discovery. And he just gave me my like little $300,000 corner and said, this is yours. Go play with it. And that's where it kind of started, where I was not only, I had like a full autonomy of what I was doing, but also I was just straight up fooled by innovation. So things about my doctoral research is I ended up having and creating things that would have an immediate translation. So I was making research use only diagnostic kits for applications for PerkinElmer. I was but at the same time, I was doing a lot of engineering. So I had 3D modeling, I was making novel devices. I ended up getting a patent in the process and a number of awards and recognitions. But for specifically speaking about my patented device, it came out because my advisor once said, you cannot do this. This is not possible. And I just really wanted to do it. So it kind of goes to show that I never take no for an answer. But just to give you all a sense of timeline, I had to start my research from scratch each time. And even then, I finished my doctoral degree in like 3.5 years from scratch with like 9 projects. And that's kind of not the normal. So I don't want to set that unrealistic expectations on all of you that, this is what you're supposed to do. I just want to give you all a quick overview of what I've sort of gone through. And just, before my doctoral, when I was doing my master's, I was working 3 jobs full time and working for free in 2 labs full time on top of my classes. So that was another rough journey. But this kind of culminates or captures my doctoral journey. And it's more so, hey, this is where I have made the contributions. This is the tissue engineering side of things. This is the diagnostic side of things. This is how I'm making translational. And I'm driven strongly by the idea of making a global change. But the truth is, when I say all of this right now, it seems easy. And there are moments, there are pockets of charms about the whole thing where, you go to conferences, you meet all these amazing people, you are invited to go to talks and you're teaching. Like I derive my joy and ecstasy from teaching and mentoring my students. And also, of course, like innovating and problem solving. And these are, 3 of my most beloved students. So this guy way here, he joined me when he was a freshman and he's graduating in May. So my littlest one is finally graduating, and it's a hard pill to swallow that your kids are growing up, but also they're all doing amazing things. What I think we don't talk about a lot in engineering, especially as women engineers, as anyone existing in fields where the norm is seeing men. And in America, the norm is seeing white men and possibly some white women or East Asian men. That's about it. You do not see a lot of women of color. you do not see a lot of people of color. Forget like women. You don't see a lot of people of color. So if you ever come across a Black man scientist, appreciate him because he probably had to go through a lot to get there. And so what we don't talk about are not just the societal and overall environmental challenges, but also there are personal challenges. There will be moments like that's literally me sitting on the lab floor with my head in my face crying because I had done the same experiment like 7 times and the results were different each time. This was me like at 4 in the morning, and I was doing an engineering homework, but I also had to do a photography experiment for one of my classes. So, it was like, okay, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This is me at midnight testing my device. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it because I have no life. And this was me, of course, during the pandemic when, we were working. And then, of course, in addition to just constantly innovating and constantly being an engineer, which is a challenging work of its own, you are expected to invent yourself or like learn more about yourself while also giving back to the community. And so having a life outside the lab and not just like, oh, I have a social life where I have friends. That's just not alone. You have to do, you're expected almost, especially when you have worked so hard to make a space for yourself, you are expected to give back. And then, of course, there is the broader implication. So not just within your institution, but also outside the institution. And I'm not going to even like sift through and go through all of this, but the long story short of it is you end up meeting people at different conferences where you go. And then if you are successful in getting your point across, getting your personality visible and appreciated, you get then invited to make all this broader scientific communication or broader scientific contributions, which is very important because that's when you are able to make not just a true change within a specific institution, but also just globally in general. So this is kind of more me delving into the reality of Ivy Leagues, because while everyone is screaming a lot of things, so for Ivies, a lot of the time I'll give talks to high school students who are trying to get into Ivies, and my tips and tricks for them are different. But when I'm talking to a college crowd like you, I need to be really real. So first thing is, we are all taught to dream big and follow the dreams, which we all do. But what they don't put in like the little disclaimer is be ready because it's going to crush you at some point. Sometimes your own expectations are so big, the weight of it gets immense for you to hold. And also just accepting the truth. And when I say Ivy League, it's not just the Ivy League. I include the Ivy Plus institutions. So there's, of course, you have the 8 Ivy League schools, but then you have Stanford, Notre Dame, MIT, U Chicago, Duke, that are part of this like big Ivy League Plus network. The truth is, these institutions were not built for us. They do not have an ecosystem for us to survive or thrive. And when I say us, I mean people of color, people who are internationals, those who are first generation, those who are not from privilege, those who are not, native English speakers. And it is okay to have days when you feel like you don't belong. We call it the imposter syndrome. And even to this day, sometimes I'll have imposter syndromes where I'm like, wait, am I smart enough to do this? Am I, every time I walk in the halls of MIT, even when I'm invited to give a talk, I'll think, wait, these kids are so much smarter than I am. Do I even belong here as an invited speaker? And that is something that you need to completely accept. That's the truth that we cannot hide from. And therefore, even the act of survival at the face of adversities like this in itself is a win for you. So, you know, getting into an Ivy, big check, you know, when you get into a big institution, amazing. But then just surviving that institution in itself is amazing. You don't always have to keep winning. And I recently had a talk, I had a one-on-one with one of the Bangladeshi students at Brown, where I was telling them that, you know, it is okay for you to not win. Like, look at yourself. You're coming from friggin' this small school in Dhanmondi to Brown, and you're already like doing amazing things. Like, you don't really have to win every single award to feel validated. So it is okay to not feel validated at times. Um, and this is something I want everyone to kind of take it to their heart, is it's not always glamorous. We work a lot. And when I say we, I think it's like true for most people, where social media is all about like glitz and glamour, but it's not the truth. It is never the truth. There is a lot of chaos. There's a lot of hard work that's put behind in making it seem like everything is working, but everything is not really a smooth sail. And then when you do make your space, though, make sure you learn how to use your voice. It is okay to challenge the system at times, because even though it gets hard for you, it means you're opening doors for others to come after you. And another point that I cannot emphasize enough on is you need to be open to learning, and you need to be open to know how to learn. And to this day, I always say, you know what, I actually don't know what that means. I need to learn. I need to go do my homework before I can come teach you. And failure is also okay. And, you know, a lot of the times I get questioned like, hey, you've done all of this, like, you know, must be a smooth sailing. It was not. Behind each accepted paper, there are like 20 different rejections that came with. Behind each award that I won, there were like 40 others that I didn't win. So that's also a reality that we need to accept. And when people say nepotism only exists in certain parts of the world, it's not true. Nepotism exists everywhere. Nepotism exists in science. Nepotism exists in academia. And not just, when I say nepotism, it's not just like a personal relationship. It's also about who you work with. So, for example, somebody working for Woodruff, Dr. Woodruff over at Michigan now, they're going to have a much easier access to a lot of the ovarian cancer labs than me, even though I graduated from Brown, because Woodruff has her reputation set for ovarian cancer research. So, you know, you have your scientific lineage, you know, not just your family lineage, but you also have your research and scientific lineage, where a big like nepotism part comes in. And then there's also the politics and networking that comes in, because say someone from Brown will definitely have a smoother sailing through interviews than someone from Penn State. And that's not just because they're not, you know, capable or competent, but that's because it's just how the system is designed. And so for you to accept it is something that you need to learn in the process. And of course, as long as you know why you're doing what you're doing, you'll kind of find the way. The best advice kind of that I got from my PhD advisor is try to be fluid, where, you know, you're like water. You're not, you take the shape of your container. You're not stopped by a barrier. You just find a different route. And so how you need to prepare for your, and this is strictly, especially if you're applying for graduate schools, right? And we also have a lot of policy changes here in the US, where funding is now a big issue. A lot of people who got their acceptances are getting it taken away because of NIH fund cuts. But just looking ahead, I think the smartest moves are planning ahead. So if you, those who are first years in this webinar right now, y'all are doing an excellent job. Second years, y'all are still doing good. Third years, still okay. You know, you're going to be fourth years in June, and you're going to have to like kind of get prepared for applying for the next cycle. But the truth is, the earlier you prepare, the better, because especially going into like PhD programs, they expect you to have some sort of hands-on motivation. But long story short, make sure you have a strong academic foundation. Now they say, oh, you need to have a solid GPA. Truth is, did I have a solid GPA as an undergrad? I actually did not. At least I don't think I had an amazing GPA. I could have done better for sure. And I also had like extenuating circumstances. But that said, the GPA alone is not a make or break case, but it does play a good role. It plays a solid role in getting you through the door, your first step in. But also then you need to show that you're interested in research, because all of graduate school is, you know, PhD is never, or, you know, this is PhD, masters, MD, PhD. Graduate school in general is never about, oh, I'm going to just read all of this and get it done. It's all about how you find answers to questions that have previously not been answers, right? And so just show that you're proactive about a lot of things. Another thing is your story. Everybody's got a resume. You know, I worked at admissions at Penn State, and we would see thousands and thousands of applications a day. And a lot of them are very similar, especially like, you know, when you're applying to IVs, these are like top people of their classes. So they really know like, okay, you have a perfect 4.0, you have, you play 20 different instruments, and you founded like a nonprofit, and you have, you know, you are the president of XYZ club in your undergrad, and you dance and you help like 20 different underprivileged kids, you know, on weekends. Great. Everybody does that. Every single admission application coming in will have a similar story. But tell them your story for either why you're interested in that specific school, the specific program, or the specific research. Tell your honest story, and you don't have to make anything up. And I learned that because I always think I have a very silly story. Like I had a wrestler as an inspiration who made me into the scientist that I am today. And that's a hilarious story if you think about it. Like, wait, a wrestler who never finished high school is the reason why you have a PhD today. Are you kidding me? Why you want to be a professor? And the truth is, that is the truth. And I cannot lie about it, but it's so unique. And it's, you know, it's a good hook to tell your story. You know, people want to know. And then just the whole, hey, guess what? I used to have dial-up internet back when I was applying to college, to, hey, guess what? Now I'm doing all of this great stuff. That shows growth, constant evolving of who you are. Another thing, and I cannot say this enough to people all around the universe, is do not just go for the name brand. Do not go for the Harvards, the MITs, the Browns, the Princetons. Look at things that align with your goal. Meaning, if you want to work on, let me see, if you want to do like AI work and you have an amazing opportunity at UD Austin, versus for some strange reason you get offered to do like a small neuro project at say Dartmouth, which is also an Ivy, and you're like, I'm going to go to Dartmouth because it's an Ivy, that would be a wrong choice. You know, your call would be to pick the best where you're going. So, for example, Johns Hopkins, JHU is not an Ivy League. It is actually part of the Ivy Plus network, but it's not officially an Ivy League. And yet they have the best biomedical engineering program. And it's, getting accepted into JHU bioengineering holds merit over Harvard bioengineering any day. So it's a lot about things that help you move your story forward, that helps you move your purpose forward. And of course, emailing people ahead of time. A lot of the time, it's about cold emailing people. You'll end up emailing 200 people before you hear from one person. Funny thing, I emailed this professor at Columbia University when I was a high school student, and even as an undergrad. And of course, I never ended up going to Columbia. But now when, he's my LinkedIn connection, I was like, hey, Dr. Hess, do you remember I ended up emailing you and, said I was too proactive and I needed to think about graduate school. I needed to think about a few things. And that's okay. And he's like, I don't remember, but I'm glad you're doing great things now. So a lot of the times these people won't remember because they're bombarded with emails every single day. But it's important to make sure you're reaching out and you're building connections. And that doesn't always have to be the professors, actually. You can always go to their websites and reach out to their current students, because you're more likely to hear back from a graduate student than you are from a professor. The letters of recommendation, that is another part where you need people who know you, not just people who taught you classes. You need people who have a strong reputation, but people who also will advocate for you in a room where you're not there. So you need people who are your biggest cheerleaders when you're preparing all of this. And be very strategic. So do not do anything last minute. Graduate school, last minute applications tend not to go well. Use spreadsheets for tracking different templates and ask for feedback from your friends, your professors. Reach out to people on LinkedIn. Like, I get so many requests on LinkedIn. And even if I don't personally have the time, I will connect them with one of my friends who have the time, or a friend who I think would be a better mentor to a person. And this goes globally. So it's kind of like sad putting it like this, but I have had a better luck, personally speaking, from non-Bengali academics than Bengali academics overall, to just hear back and get their feedback. So do not just limit yourself saying, hey, I'm not gonna, of course, don't like email John Yates asking about a single chromatography question, because he's not, he's never going to respond because he's John Yates. But it is okay to then find like a Dave Cahoon who reply to your things. And he's also a great mass spectrometrist. So, and again, I'm like just speaking things straight from my personal experiences. But be very strategic when you're picking schools. And these are some things that I think I've taken from my personal journey. Is your journey you can never succeed alone. You definitely need a lot of people. But once you get to the top, it gets lonely. That's for a fact. But going up alone is not a singular journey. Whether it's in college, it's in school, you need to survive with your tribe. You need to have mentors, friends, family, inspirations. And you also need mentees. So I have a lot of mentees who I keep learning from constantly. One of my mentees, he's now making a 6-figure salary at Stryker, and he's an amazing guy. Like, he's my go-to guy every time I'm applying for a job, because he'll look through my resume and give me an honest feedback. And this is one of my students. So it's a two-way street, mentoring. Always start early. Make sure you give yourself ample amount of time as you refine through things. And it is okay to ask for help. And when I say we are rooting for you, people who've crossed your steps, we are always rooting for you because we know how hard it was for us to overcome. And now that we're on the other side, we want to bring you here with us. And of course, do practice interviews. And one thing I think this generation has, one tool that people do not talk about a lot is generative AI. And a lot of the times I will do practice talks and interviews and lectures actually with my chat GPT. And I have like 6 different GPT personalities, but I will really say, hey, Gaston, can you help me prepare for this? And Gaston, I'll say like, hey, Gaston, what are some of the questions I might face today for like this specific lecture? And Gaston will help me prepare. And so basically use your tools that you have to prepare for all of this, the things that are to come. And one thing that I tell everyone is there are moments where you've learned so much and you still feel like you don't know anything. So one of the things that I do a lot is I listen to audiobooks and podcasts, and each time I learn something new from a different person. And these are like podcasts from like actors and actresses, and you're like, wait, you actually have life lessons too. So your inspiration and knowledge can come from anywhere in this world. And my last words, you don't really need to be perfect. You just need to be very honest and very sincere in every single thing you do. And I think the best way for me to help you out today in this webinar is if we open the floor up for questions, because it's much easier for me to give you an honest feedback on that as opposed to me just rambling on. But thank you so much for this. And I'm going to stop presenting.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an informative and inspiring session. We will now move on to the Q&A session. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hands.
Ooh, is okay. That's me. Would you mind navigating
Yes, ma'am.
this,
Sure.
moderating this?
Aisha, you can go first.
Thank you,
You're
Miss. I
welcome.
loved your way of speaking. It was down to earth. You are an amazing orator, first and
Oh,
foremost.
thank you. Thank you.
And
Appreciate it.
what you were saying, like your story about the wrestler and everything,
Yep.
what exactly do you all look for when you read these letters? Because I don't think I have an interesting story to tell like yours. Maybe you can say that it's a bit something I'm not exactly comfortable sharing, because most people in this country would think of some things as a stain, as you know, as a Bangladeshi. So in such cases, what do you think that I can share, I can talk about? What would
Yeah, that's a good thing. So, a lot of people. So, first of all, thank you for all the compliments. So, few things. I think we all think we do not have a story, and somehow we all do. Especially if you're like in Bangladesh, where you do not see a female scientist or engineer anywhere. I something came on my Facebook the other day. There was a lady. She's a scientist, and she was with her boss who happens to be like the head of regenerative medicine somewhere, and she was wearing a gown, and all that people could comment about was, what the heck, like, oh my gosh, I don't believe she's a scientist. Well, she's a scientist who's at a glamorous program, who's glammed up, like, excuse me. So we tend to come from a society where we are not celebrated as much. And so our stories are basically a tapestry of the small wins that comes along the way, right? And so things you might think are not interesting enough to tell it ends up being your ability to storytell. So, um, I mean, my story is honestly ridiculous. Like, let me be honest about it. Like, we all grew up, like my generation, we all grew up in a household watching WWE. Like, I don't know if there are like boys in this call, but y'all would know, like, like The Rock, John Cena, Undertaker, they were like the thing. And so, of all people, me being from Narayanganj, I happen to just hopelessly be in love with Dave Batista. And that is just a hilarious thing. And, but the fact that, I got so obsessed with him that I started reading up on his journey and his ex-wife's struggle with ovarian cancer, and eventually going down a route of tissue engineering and how, it can come in to save cancer. It was just, the moment, like a fluke that happened, right? And nobody in my family is a scientist. And that is just like one part of the story. I know people who are here at Brown who both their parents are doctors. So obviously coming from like a space of privilege, but they still have a story to tell. Like, hey, guess what? I know I come from privilege, but I want to open the doors for others to come. So, you are moved. You always have a story to tell. And nobody, honestly, is going to ever read your admission story except the admissions committee. So, whatever you think, it's like, oh, I'm not going to say this because it's going to paint me in a bad light. You know what? Only the school is going to know. Nobody else is going to know. And like probably your letters of writers, if you choose to share it with them. I mean, I know when I was interviewed by the Business Standard, I opened my big mouth like, hey, guess what? We have had, I've been through a bunch of assaults and stuff, and my family didn't appreciate it as much, but that's the truth. You cannot hide things. I really think it's a lot about sitting down. And one thing that helps me get my stories out, and like I said, y'all are blessed to have Chat GPT in your lives, where you just have GPT ask you questions. Literally just go on GPT and say, hey, I don't think I have a story, but can you mind asking me questions to find out if I even have a cool story to tell? And that's a cold truth. I mean, I have a colleague, she's a tenured professor at Harvard, and she uses her Chat GPT as a therapist. So, she has 20 grants right now, including NIH and a Chan Zuckerberg initiative grant, and massive, brilliant RNA scientist, but she uses Chat GPT as a therapist. So, things, you just got to have faith in yourself and just find your story out. Okay. I hope that
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you
Next
so
one.
much, ma'am. I will be reading out the questions in the chat box one by one for you, starting with Taskia Tabasum, who says, Apu, I'm a first year Triple E student. Do you have any advice or tips for transferring as an undergrad student?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're a first year student now, which means, because typically they like you transferring in sophomore years. So ideally you would be starting in the fall or spring of your second year. I would recommend reaching out to admissions committee ahead of time, but always transfers are harder because there's a very limited pool of students that they accept. So you're gonna have to do a lot of like proactive reaching out, and you need a very, very strong case for them to believe in, like, hey, I had this special circumstances, which is why I did not apply the first round, and now I'm applying as a transfer student. So kind of, and be prepared to experience a year loss. Like, you might have to repeat a lot of things. Okay, next one.
Uh, Thank you so much, ma'am. We have a question from Shaira Imtiaz. Ma'am, how do we tailor our personal LinkedIn accounts during applications process? What should we highlight so that they would be eye-catching for Ivy League universities?
Great question. So, truth to be told, the University Admission Commission's never gonna never gonna look at your LinkedIn. It's the specific, if you're applying for graduate school, it's gonna most likely going to be your specific advisor that you reach out to, or members of your lab who are gonna look at your LinkedIn. But basically, couple of checkpoints, they expect you to have a complete LinkedIn, have your picture, have a nice little tagline, show that you're active. I'll see accounts that the last time they posted was like 2019, and I'm like, what even? Like, are you even active? I don't know if I should go by this. But most importantly, the thing is your resume or your CV and your LinkedIn should be comparable. So there should nothing be on your LinkedIn that's not on your CV, and there should nothing be on your CV that's not on your LinkedIn. So just the beauty is LinkedIn is unlimited space, so you can put everything and anything. On your CV, you might have to tailor it and cut it down at times. But basically, your LinkedIn should be an extended version of your CV with like as much details as you possibly can put in there. I only like nowadays, I only put like, hey, this is like my class is graduating, or this paper's out, and things like that. I do not explicitly put a lot of my project descriptions on my LinkedIn, which I really should get to. And LinkedIn is like never personal. I think our subcontinent is the only place where I've seen people use LinkedIn as a matrimonial service, as social media, but LinkedIn is generally very professional. So, stick to professionalism. So just make it as complete as you can.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Moving on to the next question in the chat box, and those who have raised their hands, I will be coming to you. We have a question from Shafiur Rahman Nobo. Ma'am, if I want to study in any Ivy League university for masters, what are the requirements apart from bachelor's degree, bank statement, and so on?
Okay, great question. So all the programs and the Ivy Leagues, like every institution, they have a different criteria. So different programs, even in the same institution, have different requirements. So some programs will require you to have a GRE, others won't. So for example, I think Brown Biomedical Engineering no longer requires a GRE, but Penn State Biomedical Engineering PhD would require you to have a GRE. So it's very institution and program dependent. So you're going to have to go through each single website and note things down. Remember how I was saying, like, oh, have a spreadsheet, have a way of organizing things, have all the details in a spreadsheet. Like, hey, this is the deadline. These are my required documents that I need. So they definitely need a statement of purpose, couple of labs you'd be interested in, and of course your GRE scores, your research experience, all of that. So it's definitely like an institution and program specific thing.
Thank you, ma'am. Next question is from Nusaiba Tasnim Khan. Ma'am, were there any specific habits, mentorships, or mindsets that helped you break down the overwhelming steps into something manageable? I personally have a lot of difficulty getting out of my own head and often can't seem to get over the fear of failure. So I'd love to know how you dealt with those feelings during your journey.
That is a very, very good question, Nusaiba. Let me say that first. So those who don't know, and I don't talk about it a lot actually, as much as I should, I have dyslexia. I have ADHD. I have PTSD. And I have OCD. That's a lot. And I have BPD. So there's like 5 health concerns right there. But my dyslexia is to the point where I see numbers that are flipped. So, if you're a scientist or an engineer, if something says like 240 and you're reading it as 204, that is not good. So of course there are moments where you doubt, like self-doubt is inevitable. There are moments where you are questioning yourself. Like I'll question myself 20 times. Like when one of my colleagues said, you should be nominated. I'm nominating you for the stat Wonderkind. I was like, I'm not gonna win. Like, why would I get a Wonderkind award, which is like it's called the next scientific superstar? I was like, I'm not, because I couldn't get over my head. And in those moments, I'll actually sit down sometimes and reflect on how far I've come. And that means, um, for me, disengaging helps a lot. So if I start like hyperventilating and, having like a moment where I'm like, oh shoot, I'm about to have a panic attack, I'll like try to do like grounding techniques where I like breathe, find like 5 things that are green around you, find 3 names of people I can talk to right now, and kind of like random nonsenses like that. And a lot of the times I will take my personal space. I'll, you know, pull myself in a little corner. For me, listening to a lot of like Batista's podcast helps a lot. He's a very grounded individual. As famous as he is, he's one of the most humble people I know. And so, kind of seeing, hey, these people are not afraid of failures, that helps a lot for me. And I will, in all honesty, I'll consume a lot of cringe content, and I cannot get over this. This is hilarious. And but it's true, like a lot of the time you will open up social media and you're seeing people are like fighting over, wait, excuse me, who's fighting over what now? And it's so funny. You're like, wait, excuse me, if people have like that problem that's making in the news, I think my problem is much minor compared to that. And this is something, I cannot tell my mom enough. And one of my friends, he's a former contestant in the Indian TV show Big Boss, VJ Andy. And Andy and I will like sometimes be online and we'll talk about things. And my mom will be like, why are you and Andy like giggling so much? I was like, Mom, you're not getting it. Like these people are fighting over a cup of tea. Like this is ridiculous. And it's so funny. But sometimes, you need to watch stupid things like that in life to then realize, oh, you know what? Now I have the answer to my experimental failure. So a lot of the time, doing things that are completely opposite helps a lot. But for me, reflecting on, the harder days, I reflect on how me moving forward helps those who are coming after me, helps people, like helps you guys who will be coming in and filling in my shoes in the future. And so that's something that keeps me going.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I will now take questions from the people who have been raising their hands. You have waited for a very long time. I'm very sorry. Tazvir Bhaiya, please go ahead. And after that, Shihab Sharar, you can ask your question.
Okay, first of all, ma'am, thank you so much for such a really interactive and meaningful session. I really love the way you actually articulated your experiences so that we can relate to it. So I really appreciate that. So I
Yep.
actually have 2 questions.
Yep.
Well, the first one is the fact that I noticed during my research on course-based masters and a lot of other courses. So a lot of the topics or the courses they offer in the master's programs, they tend to be something very so advanced that I feel like, okay, I haven't read these things, or maybe I have maybe just gone through the terms, or I'm not familiar with these. So how common are these cases where an undergrad student is going to an Ivy League or maybe any top-notch university in the US, and they face a very huge gap in their academic knowledge? And well, that's just my first question. And how do I even overcome these challenges during my time there? And my other question is, inshallah, I'll be attending a conference in the US. So how should I take that opportunity to link up with the professors and the other industrial people. So that's just these are my two questions.
Okay, great question. So let me put it this way. Not just classes though. So okay, first of all, before I like get into all the other questions, you all need to stop calling me ma'am. I feel like I am vintage. I'm not, my students call me Dr. Fari because they cannot say Fariha for some reason. So feel free to call me Dr. Fari. That's fine. You don't have to call me ma'am over and over again. Or you can call me Ramisa, that's fine too. So that's me. You asked a very solid question. And a lot of the times, not just you though. So for example, I went to Penn State for my undergrad, right? And even then when I came to Brown, there were classes where I was like, wait, what is this again? Like, you know, I've learned of this concept, but this, I don't know how to apply to this. So it's not just you, it happens to everybody. And even like, look at me, I went from, you know how I said I was switching researchers like that. The thing is, nobody really is gonna teach you. That's like the first part. And even like especially here, like the professors are gonna come, different people will have like different ways of teaching. You'll meet some professors who really want you to learn. And then you'll meet some professors who are so busy with their research, they don't even care about preparing the lecture. So you'll have both of these sides of things. And not just classroom, even outside the classroom. So when I joined Dr. Chapathi's lab, I had never seen a mass spec in my whole life, bro. I was given this like $300,000 instrument and he said, go play with it. I was like, excuse me, what if I break this? You know, and no one's going to teach you. And so what I did was I started looking up different organizations that would do like small workshops and webinars and little lectures and talks that were very useful. And what your generation has that mine didn't is we have a lot of educational content on YouTube as well, where, you know, you don't really need to go too far to learn a few things. So sometimes, say if it's talking about project management using Gen AI. So I'm not a business person, right? And here I am trying to learn about project management. And I was like, wait, my engineering brain cannot comprehend this. Like, what am I doing? You know, I cannot do this. So it's okay to like tell yourself, I don't know this and I'm open to learning, and start from scratch. So I'll start from like as primitive as Googling just the terminology and kind of building up from there. And a lot of the times I'll make my own notes, you know, like, hey, this is what it is. And so now when I'm doing like RNA biology, first of all, I hate RNA and I'm leading the mass spec core at the RNA Center. Great. I don't know much about tRNA modifications, and now I'm doing like nucleoside profiling. So it's a lot. And I read a lot of scientific publications. And again, I cannot say this enough. I use my GPT a lot, where I'll like upload a paper and say, hey, can you give me a breakdown of this specific paper? What's the summary? What's the key point? And say it will generate something. And then I'll like give it a different prompt saying, hey, can you regenerate it for someone who's not acclimated to the topic? The point is, you are going to get this like advanced degree or a master's because you don't know a lot of things, right? And so if there are terminologies that are already scaring you, that's a great class for you because you're going to learn a lot. If you already go in a class knowing everything, you are paying money to not really learn anything new. So that's like kind of the strategy of how to learn. Regarding the conference, congratulations, you're coming to the US. Let me know where you're coming. Happy to see you. A lot of these conferences are a great space to meet people. I usually go through the conference program and kind of like make a little list of, hey, these are the people I want to meet. I try not to be a creep. If I've read the work before, I'll actually go and say, hey, by the way, I've read a certain paper of yours and let's talk, you know, like find a common ground to start talking. But that's kind of I try not to seem very creepy. And a lot of these people are very, very down to earth. So you just meet people and you'll start immediately talking like, hey, the moment you say, hey, I'm from Bangladesh, they're going to ask like 20 million questions already. So you kind of have your like first part, like, opening question kind of sorted out for you. So I hope that helps.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Fariha. Shihab Sharar, you can go forward with your question.
Hello, Dr. Furry. I'm going to keep calling you Dr. Furry. Hi. So I've loved how you spoke about the admissions. So personally, for my undergrads, I also applied to the US, and I also got into Texas Austin. And somehow for the visa complications, I couldn't go. So I related to a lot of stuff you said. So my question is, I'm in my second year, and I've started doing a bit of research with protein predictions, and it's some more on the coding side of the research. So we're trying to predict how the proteins would be predicted and all that stuff. So me and my group, they've published a review paper, and that we presented in a conference. However, the moving on will be my professor. He told me to write a paper finding my own method, thinking of a known disease. So I want to specialize in some of that. So currently I'm really stuck. I want to work with Parkinson's, and I want to do how deep learning methods, can help with protein predictions. So if you have any idea, if you have any tips on where I can get started, that would be really appreciated.
Yep. Great. Congratulations. Review articles are a great way to increase your citation score. That is something that I'm trying to do. Like my kids, when I say my kids, these are all my students, they have, and also like in the congratulations on getting published, that review article, because in a world of chat GPT now, getting review articles published is a big challenge. So props to you. And I completely agree with your advisor on getting, your own method kind of started. So for me, where I start, especially because you're doing a lot of this up and coming emerging technology, is I generally start with Web of Science, where I do kind of like a background screen on, okay, where the research trend is, because you can do like trend line plottings and stuff like that on Web of Science. But basically I'll do like keyword searches, see where the trend is, where the research is going. Is it like an upward trajectory? Is it like going down? What's kind of like the vibe of the field? And I will do like, I'll read like the highly cited papers on that specific topic for the last 5 years, and then kind of get a sense of the field and then go from there. This is what I'll tell you is we are no longer in a space where, an apple falling from the tree is considered novel anymore because everyone's discovered everything. Right now we're in that specific era of science where you make little changes and that ends up getting published. And as sad as it is, it's the truth. So if you are thinking, oh, I'm gonna publish a Nobel winning research, that's not happening. Just start small. Like, okay, I have this a whole code, and instead of doing, oh, I'm like really bad with this like computer lingo. That's why I have an undergrad that does all that for me. But a lot of this time, a lot of like the Gen AI or like the AI ML stuff is, okay, I'm gonna use a specific model. This is what I did the data extrapolation from. This is where I got like the data set from. What happens if I use an experimental data set instead of this one? Or what if I use an entirely different language model? Like if I use an LLM for the same, like if I use like 20 different language models to analyze the same set of data, how does things change, And again, I don't know much about your work. I'm just giving you kind of where I would start off is like, okay, can I retrace things? So a lot of the time I'll reverse engineer things. And that's the beauty of being an engineer is you can reverse engineer a lot of things, see which is more effective, and then start improving upon that.
Thank you, Dr. Fariha. I will now be moving to the chat box again. Um, we have a question from Saida Aida Maula Raisa Huda. Miss, how do we find out about any external fundings which can be added to the institutional scholarship received from Columbia? Saida, oh, okay, that's a different Saida. I'm sorry. Yes. Continue, ma'am, please.
So I mean, so external fundings, which a lot of the times we don't qualify for them because we're internationals. We won't qualify for, say, like the T32 grants from the NIH or the NSF grants or whatever. But there are some that are open to international students. A lot of the times I would recommend reaching out to your department, actually. So depends on what part of, if it's Columbia Seas, I would say reach out to your Seas coordinator and say, hey, I'm interested in applying for like external funds. Do you happen to have a listserv? If not, a lot of the time it's just straight up Googling things, because that's where most of it happens. One space, though, I highly recommend looking at is the Society of Women Engineering website, SWE website. SWE has a big resource base for a lot of like external funding opportunities that you can look into.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fariha. We have a question from Saida Nusrat Jahan, I believe, who has raised their hand. Please go ahead with your question.
Oh, am I audible?
Yep.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a very fun session and also very insightful session. So my question was about having research background, as you have said it, but some students might have a very good GRE score instead of a solid research background. So what would be your take on like, can GRE be a substitution of research background?
No. That is a short and sweet answer is no, because a lot of the programs don't even require GRE anymore. So like I know Brown doesn't require GREs anymore. But then if you're applying to, say, like a school like Penn State, where they do a lot of screening based on GREs, where they'll say, oh, your GRE score is not high enough, we're not even going to consider this application. So it's very institutional based. But let's put it this way: you're trying to compare a standardized score against a novel research idea, and they don't really, it's like trying to compare like apples to cucumbers. One's a vegetable trying to be a fruit and another is a solid fruit. So it's like you really cannot make that substitution. You're going to have to kind of look into your you're going to have to reach out to the programs and the advisor, but also make a case as to why you do not have research experience, saying, I didn't have the opportunity, XYZ, I couldn't, I wanted to do this, there was nothing available, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of need to, if you don't have research experience at all, you actually need to have a solid reasoning to justify why you don't have it.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Fariha. We have our last question from Taiba Rahman. What are the steps to secure a scholarship for admission to an Ivy League university, specifically for students pursuing environmental science? And is it possible to directly enroll in a PhD program without completing a master's degree?
Absolutely. So that is something I wish people had told me when I was applying, but I highly recommend all of you to apply to PhD programs first. Chances are, if you're not accepted into the PhD, you get automatically considered for a master's program. The big difference is master's, you have to pay out of pocket. PhD, it's fully funded. The way most, in fact, all US institutions work is as long as you get accepted for a PhD, you will have guaranteed funding for like 5 to 6 years. And that's, again, like that's an institutional thing, but as long as you get accepted, you have funding. And then sometimes, because professors usually won't take students unless they have funding. That's the first thing. But also sometimes professors will have an inclination like, hey, I'm going to have this specific student because I know she's going to work in an industry project that will have, that won't have funding crisis, or I'm planning on applying for a specific grant that I'll know will be there for this specific student. And so typically funding is a headache for the PI. A lot of the time though, the PI will make you do the work initially to, help, he'll ask you to either write papers or write the grant and things like that once you get in. But it's definitely kind of like funding for PhDs, definitely a yes. And also PhD without master's, 110%. The big difference is if you are not doing a master's, you're very likely looking at like a 5 to 6 years program.
Thank you again, Dr. Fariha. All right, we have time for one last question. So if anyone wants to ask a question, please write it in the chat box or raise your hand. Yes, please go ahead, Tasveer Bhaiya.
Okay. Hello again. So you just mentioned that it's actually a wiser decision, I believe, to apply for a PhD, and basically it gets transferred as a master's, right? So if I'm not accepted as a PhD student, so is that actually is that actually a good option in not just IEEE, for actually all of the universities in US or any other universities, and how much of that is entertained? This is something I just learned from you. I am actually applying at the moment, so that's why this is why. Why am I not applying for PhD then?
Yeah, so that's something that's actually a very unique concept too. So the thing is, just like, backtracking a little bit to my journey, when I was applying to like graduate school and stuff, right, I had a fully funded PhD offer from Pitt, and then I had my master's offer from Brown at the time. I actually didn't apply to Ivies because I was like, I'm never going to get accepted. And then I did. The only reason I picked Brown at the time was my opportunity to do my research was with the Jeff Morgan, the guy who like created the world's first artificial ovary. And so I was like, I'm not going to let go of this opportunity. So I made quite literally like a stupid decision of going for a master's and basically signing up for a life of poverty. But I encourage all my students to apply like first, because you're applying the application fee regardless. So apply for the PhD program. The big thing is your application needs to be really competitive. Okay. So apply for the PhD, but as you're submitting the application, do a check. There's going to be a checkbox that will ask you. And I don't know if like all schools do it, but some schools definitely have that checkbox saying, if you do not get accepted into the PhD, will you be open to be evaluated or considered for a master's program? And say yes. Now, the thing though is not all the time they're gonna they're not gonna offer you admissions to the master's program that you wanted to. So for example, Cornell, you can apply to Cornell for a bioengineering PhD, and then they'll say, actually, we want to offer you a master's for like systems engineering. And you're like, wait, but I don't want to do systems engineering. So they're like kind of, some of the programs will do that. Others will literally just let you be in that same program and say, hey, this is for me. But then the question becomes, is it then worth it for you to spend all that money to get that master's? For me, it was, I was mostly like chasing a dream. I took a gamble. I'll be honest. Like I took the biggest gamble of my life there. And I would not recommend, like, if you have a fully funded PhD offer, go for that. Instead of saying, I'm gonna go do a master's with Jeff Morgan. So, but I definitely recommend you to apply for the PhDs. And if you don't get into the masters, and then you can start negotiating. So that's kind of my 2 cents. That's and it's really a thing where, and a lot of the time students will go for a PhD and they'll have like a fallout with their advisor or whatever and get out with the masters and all for free, because for PhD they were fully funded. They just didn't finish PhD, so they didn't have to pay for anything. They just got a master's like for free and left.
Okay, thank you so much. This is very good information, ma'am.
I know, right? I'm good.
Dr. Fariha, we are very grateful to you for your valuable insights and for sharing your knowledge with us. Now, I would like to call the chair of IEEE NSU Student Branch, Women in Engineering Affinity Group, to share a few words with us.
Assalamu alaikum, ma'am. Am I audible? Ma'am, thank you so much for such an engaging event today. When I reached out to you first, I honestly never thought you would respond, but I am thanking my lucky stars that you did, because it was such an engaging event, and I'm sure that our audience truly appreciated all of the advice that you gave us. And I personally, I learned a lot of things from you as well. Ma'am, on behalf of IEEE NSU Student Branch, Women in Engineering Affinity Group, we want to share a token of appreciation to you for joining us today and for doing so much for us. Um, so thank you so much, ma'am. We are so grateful to you. And we hope that with all of the advice that you've given us today, we are able to go after our dreams in the future, just like you did. And if there's anything that we learned from today's session, is that we should never be afraid of taking a bet on ourselves and going after what we want. So that's what I wanted to tell you, ma'am.
Thank you. Actually, send me that thing that you just shared.
Yes, ma'am.
I will. Girl, my LinkedIn game is strong. Or also, if you guys want to put it on LinkedIn and tag me, great, even better. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So
We'll get on it right after this.
awesome. No, I'm glad you all reached out. I actually did not know that Bangladesh had IEEE, actual like certified IEEE clubs and organizations. So I'm very, very happy. And also just learning about the WIG, because I was living under a rock. I didn't think you guys had wigs, because we had wigs when we were an undergrad at Penn State, but I didn't think you all had all of that. All I see from like, okay, no, I don't. I hope this is not getting recorded. All I see from NSU are y'all are dancing, and I'm like, what's going on? Is anybody ever studying? So I didn't know. So I was very happy. I was like, yes, please, happy to be a part of this. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for such great questions. I really enjoyed this. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We're truly, truly very grateful for your presence. Thank you to all our wonderful participants for joining us this evening. We hope this session has given you the motivation and tools to dream big and plan accordingly. We now invite the participants for a group photo to commemorate this event. All right. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Ramisa Fariha, for giving us the opportunity to host this event. We hope all of you will join us more in our future events. Until then, good night. See you next time.
Thank you, everybody. And feel free to reach out.